Welcome to this week's yearly cycle updates. We are starting tonight. We're moving in to the seventh feast of the year on God's calendar, which is the Feast of Tabernacles. So let's do a little recap of where we are in the year right now. We just went through the Feast of Trumpets, going through the 10 days of awe, and finally the Day of Atonement. Now, Feast of Trumpets, like we talked about on our October updates, is one of the reminders is God wants to refresh us. He wants to give us fresh strength. He wants to reinvigorate us, give us fresh energy, fresh supply. He wants to refresh our lives. Sometimes as we go through the heat of the year, we go through the pressure of the year, we need some refreshing as we move into the fall. And then as we got to the Day of Atonement, the message that came through for me this year was a new era has begun. Inside of the Abundant Life Blueprint, over the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about how many of us could feel there's something shifted. We can't quite put words to it yet, but we can tell in the spiritual world, in the unseen world, we can't quite put words to it just yet, but something has shifted. We talked about how we felt it was the end of an era as we were closing out, getting close to the Day of Atonement. Then on the Day of Atonement, the word that came through was a new era has begun. So we're moving into this Feast of Tabernacles. The Feast of Tabernacles starts tonight, October 2nd, and runs for 7 days. And the Feast of Tabernacles is a reminder that God is tabernacling with you. He's moved in. He's with you. He'll never leave you. He'll never forsake you. He is present. His love, His grace, His unconditional love and security are with you. And when we dwell on that, when we meditate on that, when we think about that, and we're more aware of God's presence with us, this is the seventh feast, the number 7 being linked to the Sabbath. When we're aware of God's presence with us, and we're aware of how powerful He is, how much He loves us, that His love is unfailing for us, then it allows us to be secure. It allows us to rest, finally. So the Feast of Tabernacles is a reminder. It's like a fall harvest festival. It's a time to rejoice. It's a time to increase our awareness of God's presence with us and our gratitude for Him being with us all the time and never leaving us or forsaking us. And it's a time, like I said, to be aware. As we increase that our awareness of that presence, it allows us to rest, to stop toiling in our minds, to stop trying to figure everything out, and to just rest because God's with us. He's there in our moments of need. He's there when we have problems. He's there when we have needs. He sees the dream in our heart, the desires of our hearts. He's there with us on this journey of life, and He wants to help. And that's what some of this reminder of the Feast of Tabernacles is that just God is with you. During this time, the Israelite people were commanded to make little sukkahs or huts that they would eat their meals in outside. It was like a little tent or hut that they would eat their meals in, and the roof of it was open so they could look up into the sky. And this was supposed to be a reminder for them of their time in the wilderness, how even though they were going through the wilderness, God was with them. God's been with them through everything. He's always there at the time when we need Him. He's an ever-present help whenever we need Him. Now, there's also tradition in the Jewish culture during the Feast of Tabernacles to eat stuffed foods that are stuffed inside of something, as a reminder of what? God is inside of us. We're filling the inside of things. We talked about the Day of Atonement is like the close of a circle. We talked about a cycle has just been completed, we feel like. The Day of Atonement closed out that cycle. Now it's time for God to fill it. Think about the Old Testament, the temple of Moses, the temple of Solomon. Once they built all of the temple, they built all of the physical temple, it wasn't quite completed. God's presence had to come and fill the tabernacle. Our body now is the temple. God's presence is filling us, stuffing us, overflowing out of us is what He wants to happen. In the Jewish culture, like I said, they have symbolic foods that they eat on most of the feast days. And the symbolic food for this time is stuffed foods, thinking about overflow, thinking about stuff, thinking about filling the inside of things. Some things to be thinking about. Now, for those of you in the Abundant Life Blueprint, we're going to be getting into our final week here of the 8th date training. We're going to be talking about wrapping it all up, putting all of the practical steps together. We're going to talk about framing out the master blueprint for the Abundant Life Blueprint and talking about our standard of grace, that God is doing continually good for us. He cherishes us as the apple of our eye, of his eye. He's got us encircled. He's got us covered from every angle. And he's working to make us great. And we have to learn how to receive that grace from him. We have to learn to let it flow through us. Like we talked about last week in the Abundant Life Blueprint, we have to learn to get ourselves out of the way. We've been praying about, Lord, help us get us out of the way so that you can flow through us. We got to get out of the way. And as we dwell on God's presence, we're more aware of his presence. We increase our own presence. It opens our eyes. We see all of the opportunities to be a blessing to other people around us as we increase our presence. So we're going to be talking about 8 practical steps that we can begin implementing this week to begin to make this a reality, to simplify it down and to make it a reality. So for those of you in the Abundant Life Blueprint, we're going to get into the training here. And we'll get started. Let me pull up the slides and we'll get going.